Hi everyone, it's Mike here from 20 Road and welcome to this quick start guide on getting the file system scanner set up for Birdsnest Explorer. So if we log into our server and go to our Birdsnest install folder, in our case it's C Birdsnest, and we go to the scanners folder. So the file system scanner or fsscanner.exe is the executable we're going to be using. So what we need to do is we need to create a config for it. So if we go into the config folder, and there are a bunch of example configs here. We're looking for the example-fsconfig.json. So let's make a copy of that. Now by default, the fsscanner.exe will look for fsconfig.json, but it's usually a good idea to create multiple file system configs for your different data stores. So I'm going to be scanning a data store called content store, so I'm going to call this file fsconfig-contentstore.json, and if we open this with Notepad to edit it, now if we have a set of credentials that need to be used because the user that you're logged in as doesn't have the correct permissions to the file system you need to scan, then you can create them here. Set the username with domain/username format, the password, and we need to give it a unique ID so that we can use to reference this set of credentials later in the config. Then we come down to our data stores section. Now, a data store is essentially a set of physical disks onto which there may be one or more shared file systems that we wish to scan. Best practice is to have one config file for each data store so that you control the load. So in our data stores list, we have a data store object, and inside of there we have a name for the data store, so we'll give this data store the name content store. There is a host that this data store is connected to. Now the host is going to search in the Birdsnest Explorer database for a device node with the same name as the one you set here, and that is case sensitive. So if you have an Active Directory computer that has this data store attached to it, you'll want to match those up. So go to Birdsnest Explorer, look for that node and get the name property and copy it in with the correct case. In my instance, the device is called Bricks01, and we'll give it a comment. This is the content store. So that's the data store part done. Now we have one or more file systems. So we have a file system list, again with a square bracket, and we have one file system object and another file system object. Now again, we give our file systems an ID, and this ID needs to be unique. I tend to use the host and then the share name that I'm using. So in my case, there is a DNS alias to Bricks01 called content store, and then the share name is content store. If we need to use one of these credentials, we can use that ID that we set to reference those credentials here. In my case, the user that I'm logged in with already has correct permissions, so I can remove this completely. Then the actual path to the share, because it's JSON format, you need to use double slashes for each slash there. So there's 4 instead of 2. So it would be / content store / content store. And then the comment, this is the content store share. Now we're only going to scan one file system, so I'm going to delete that second one from our list. And then if we come down here to the max threads option, the file system scanner is multi-threaded, so this will set the number of threads that are going to be used for our scan task. I usually start with about somewhere between 8 to 10, but if you've got a heavily loaded file system, you may wish to lower this. I'm going to leave the default. That's now been saved, and that's our config done. So to run our file system scanner, we have fsscanner.exe /config : and then we pass in our fsconfig-content store file. Now, one last command line option I'm going to add is the /batch option. This will stop the press enter to continue prompt at the end, so that if you wanted to, you could run this in a scheduled task. And we hit enter to go. And we can see our scan job running with our 8 threads, and we can see our file permissions or folder permissions being recorded into the Birdsnest Explorer database. So there's our scan done. Now obviously this is a relatively small file system. This may take, several hours depending on the size of your file system and the number of folders in it. So let's go into our Birdsnest Explorer console. And if we have a look at our server information, we can now see we have some file system folders and a data store. And if we have a look at the visualizer, we can see our content store, data store, our content store folder. We can see that this data store is connected to this device, and we can drill down further into our related folders. And we can see here that this folder has blocked inheritance, so there may be something we need to look at there. And then up here we can see permissions, type of permission, and the rights applied. So that's it for getting the file system scanner set up in a nutshell. If you have any queries, feel free to get in touch via the 20road.com website. Thanks very much and have a great day.